Welcome back. All right, so I'm starting off today with a video idea that I've had for a while. I figured, well, today's as good a day as any. And so I've spent about an hour going through the last 11 drafts just for first round picks that got traded. And who traded those picks, and then which player was picked in that spot. I'm not worried about hypotheticals of, well, no, see, they wouldn't have drafted that player because these guys were all available. Once we get to what Boston did in 2015, that'll be the discussion point. But I just wanted to focus on who was drafted in those spots and whether or not the team that traded that pick would be overly upset that that's the player that ultimately they ended up losing. In some cases, yes, and in some cases, no. And this is a video that's rooted in many years ago when I was talking about first-round picks being traded, and very often fans will say the same thing. It's a late first-round pick. It's a middle-of-the-round first-round pick. It's not a big deal. It's not going to hurt us. We can acquire this rental at the deadline. We move a number 20 pick. Who cares? It's going to be like number 20. Who cares? And I've always thought that was short-sighted, and so I wanted to do a video on this. Now, the reason I'm wearing a Seals jersey is because famously, the Montreal Canadiens acquired the number 1 draft pick from the Oakland Seals, and to make sure that it was a number 1 draft pick, at the time that it was traded, it wasn't going to be the number 1 draft pick necessarily. The Kings were pretty bad too, and so there was a chance the LA Kings could finish at the bottom of the league. So Montreal made a trade with LA to make their team better, to make sure that the draft pick they got from Oakland ends up being the number 1 draft pick, and then Montreal drafted Guy Lafleur. So, well done. So we'll go ahead. We'll start off with Anaheim, all the preamble aside. Anaheim's only moved one number 1 draft pick. One first-round draft pick, I should say. That was in 2017. They traded the number 29 pick to Chicago, Henry Jokiharju. Also, I'm going to say some of these picks moved through other teams, you know, where maybe Anaheim trades that first-round pick to, say, the Rangers, and then the Rangers traded to Chicago. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about where the pick originated and where the pick was taken. So I'm not worried about who it went through on the way there. Jokiharju's been a decent defenseman throughout his career. I don't think Anaheim's overly upset about Jokiharju. For Arizona, they traded 3 first-round picks. 2017, it was a number 7 pick to the New York Rangers, Elias Anderson. Anderson didn't end up having the kind of career that one would have expected of a number 7 pick. So that's not a big deal, but the other 2 kind of hurt. In 2019, in a swap of picks, they get Cam York, or they traded number 14, which became Cam York. Philadelphia drafts Cam York. So that was a swap of picks, and we'll discuss that when we get down to Philadelphia. In 2020, they traded the number 18 pick to New Jersey. That became Dawson Mercer. So that's why when people say, it's a late teens pick, who cares? Dawson Mercer's a pretty good two-way forward. Utah would love to have Dawson Mercer in the lineup. So that's 3 first-round picks traded by the Arizona Coyotes, which mildly surprising since Arizona generally wasn't a contender during that time. Boston's got skewered for the amount of times they've traded number 1 picks. But 2018's first-round pick, number 26, traded. Ottawa ends up drafting Jacob Bernard-Docker. Now, what's weird is, in 2020, the number 27 pick they traded, which ultimately was taken by Anaheim, Jacob Perreault. So I guess the fact that these 2 guys are both of them ended up being guys named Jacob. Kind of weird. Jacob's not an overly common name in hockey. So, I mean, I know there's other Jacobs, but anyways. Number 22, Nathan Gauthier. That's also an Anaheim pick. So, Anaheim, Perreault, and Gauthier, both of those Boston picks that they got. Number 28 in 2023, traded to Toronto, Easton Cowan. That one might hurt a little bit for Boston down the road. I did complain a lot about Boston trading first-round draft picks, but all things considered, outside of Cowan, there isn't really anybody there that I think Boston would lose a lot of sleep over. All right, Buffalo's easy. The only first-round pick traded in 2024, the number 11 pick traded to San Jose, Sam Dickinson, and it's because Buffalo just has so many prospects, young players at every position. They're to the point where the draft picks aren't necessarily what they've needed. So it is an odd position for them to be in, but it is the only first-round pick that they've traded. So not a whole lot else to say about Buffalo. There you go. Dickinson could end up being a very good defenseman, though. The Calgary Flames have traded 5 first-round picks. 2015, it was a number 15 pick to the Boston Bruins. They drafted Zachary Senyshyn, We won't get into who else was available in 2015. We're only going to talk about Zachary Senyshyn. Calgary not concerned about losing that pick. 2018, it was the number 12 pick that was traded, and Noah Dobson, drafted by the New York Islanders. Dobson would have looked pretty good in a Calgary jersey. In 2020, the number 19 pick that ended up with the New York Rangers was used to draft Braden Schneider. So that's Dobson and Schneider on the Calgary blue line. Things could be quite different in Calgary if they still had those picks. 2022, they traded the number 26 pick. Philip Mesar, picked up by the Montreal Canadiens. We don't know as of yet whether or not Mesar is going to be an NHL regular. Again, 2022 is still too recent, I think, and a later pick and all that. 2025, the number 16 pick traded Victor Eklund, drafted by the New York Islanders in that spot. And, of course, his brother Will is doing a pretty good job with the San Jose Sharks. So it's too early to say whether or not Victor Eklund's one that the Calgary Flames wish they had back. But Schneider and Dobson, maybe. Yeah, I think it's fair to say they probably would prefer to have those players. Carolina, 5 times they've traded the first-round pick. Basically almost everyone since 2020. Number 22 in 2020 was Hendrix Lapierre. Of course, he was drafted by Washington. 2021, they traded number 27, which Nashville used to draft Zachary Leroux. 2022, they traded the number 27 draft pick. Philip Bysted goes to San Jose. 2024, they trade the number 27 draft pick. Marek Van Acker, drafted by Chicago. So the key thing is these are all late 20s, but it shows they're not winning the Stanley Cup. Also, noteworthy, when I was doing this and putting this together, one of those things that I found, and this is just interesting, the Stanley Cup winner trades their first-round draft pick almost every single time. Now, there are times where it's traded maybe after the season's done, but it still says something. Look at the teams that have already traded the number 2026 first-round picks. You might have a cup winner in there. So 2025, Carolina trades the number 29 pick. Chicago drafts Mason West. So those are 2 Chicago first-round draft picks, courtesy of the Carolina Hurricanes. But there's not a lot there that I look at and say, oh, Carolina would desperately wish they still had that player in their organization. All right, Chicago. Chicago's moved 5, going back to 2015, drafting 30th overall, so Stanley Cup. Nick Merkley was drafted by the Arizona Coyotes. So you never regret trading a first-round pick when you win the Stanley Cup. That's general rule. If you won the Stanley Cup, fine. That first-round draft pick, if that's the price you paid, it's fine. 2016, they traded the number 22 pick. German Ruptsov, drafted by Philadelphia. I'd like to apologize to Flyers fans who may not want to hear that name necessarily, but there you go. 2017, they traded the number 26 draft pick. Dallas ends up drafting Jake Ottinger. Thank you, Chicago. 2021, the number 12 pick, Cole Sillinger was drafted by Columbus. So, decent player, and when I was putting this together, I thought, Sillinger could fit in with what Chicago's got going on right now. Could be a good fit on their second or third line. 2022, they traded what became the number 6 draft pick, David Jiricek, drafted by Columbus that year. So, Jiricek's now in the Minnesota organization. I don't think there's anybody of the 5 outside of Jake Ottinger that Chicago wishes they had right now. They probably would like to have Jake Ottinger. It's another example of how when goaltenders get drafted, it's one reaction of 2. It's either how is that goaltender available there, or why was he drafted? There doesn't seem to be an in-between with goaltenders when it comes to the draft. Next up, we'll talk about Colorado. They've traded 3. 2022, they traded the number 32 pick. That's right, Stanley Cup winners. Reed Schaefer, drafted by Edmonton at number 32. And, of course, he's been moved. He's in Nashville now, and he's playing in the NHL. Number 24 in 2024 was Cole Beaudoin, drafted by the Utah, now Mammoth, at that point the hockey club. In 2025, so this year, they traded the number 22 pick to Pittsburgh, Bill Zonin. And obviously, it's way too early to decide whether or not there's any regrets. But I'll go ahead and say Colorado doesn't have any regrets with the players they've traded, because Stanley Cup in 2022, and they're off to just a remarkable run so far to start this season. So I don't think Colorado's going to be upset with anything they've done. The Columbus Blue Jackets, they've moved 2. 2017, they traded a number 24 pick. Christian Vesalainen, drafted by Winnipeg. Didn't work out for him at the NHL level. 2019, they traded the number 19 pick. Ottawa ends up drafting Lassie Thompson, a blue liner who's come back over, but he's not quite at that level, and I think now we're far enough out from his draft. It's logical to ask, is Lassie Thompson ever going to be a regular in the NHL? So Columbus, for trading two first rounders, I don't think there'd be any regrets there either. Then we get to Dallas. Dallas has moved 3. In 2021, they traded the number 15 pick. Detroit ends up drafting Sebastian Cossa, a goaltender who's doing very well in the AHL and is going to be the starting goaltender for Detroit sooner or later. With the way things have been going lately, might be sooner. Number 29 was traded by Dallas in 2023 to St. Louis. Theo Lindstein drafted there. In 2025, so this year, San Jose gets the number 30 pick. Joshua Ravensbergen, a goaltender. So I'm just sad that Ravensbergen's not a star, but at least being a Shark, I may still end up with a Ravensbergen jersey someday. I want him to play because I want to say Ravensbergen a lot. So that would absolutely be, I think that'd be great. So Dallas, 3 picks. I don't think there's any big regrets with the 3 they've moved. Which brings us to Detroit. Now, Detroit's only on the board once. 2016, they traded the number 16 draft pick. Arizona ends up drafting Jacob Chychrun. Jacob Chychrun would look pretty good on the Detroit blue line, not going to lie. That was an interesting pick at the time, too, by Arizona. This is at a time where Detroit was, trying to get themselves back above the playoff line. Number 16, traded by them. Just the one, that's it. But do I think that they wish they had Jacob Chychrun in their organization? Probably. Edmonton's moved 5. And this is one of the reasons for this video. I have to admit, 2021, they trade the number 20 pick. Minnesota drafts Jesper Wallstedt. It was a swap of picks. During that live stream, I had a very, very honest reaction to the Oilers moving a pick that ends up being a goaltender, which everybody felt the Oilers desperately needed at the time. And it's Wallstedt, who's a pretty good goaltender. In 2022, they moved the number 29 draft pick. Arizona drafts Maverick Lamoureux. 2023, they traded the number 24 pick. Nashville drafts Tanner Molendyk. Molendyk is still expected to be an NHLer at some point in time, but as a defenseman, you bring him along a little slower. 2024, Toronto ends up getting that number 31 pick. Ben Danford, who's a pretty well thought of prospect as well. And then LA this year gets the number 31 draft pick, Henry Brstevich. Now, one thing that's notable too, the number 31 picks in 2024 and 2025 mean the Oilers went all the way to the Stanley Cup final. We could have the debate about whether or not it's worth it to move a first round pick just to be the Stanley Cup finalist. To win the Stanley Cup, yes. To be a finalist and lose, really depends, I think, on the fan. And I think it depends on the pick. In this case, it's Danford and Brstevich. That is the brother of the Brstevich that's playing for the Calgary Flames as well, I do believe. All right. And Florida. Florida's moved 4. The most recent 4. Do they regret it? No. Number 28 in 2022 was Yuri Kulik, drafted by Buffalo. Sure, Kulik would fit right into what Florida has. I think he'd be a good bottom 6 forward for them. 2023, the number 31 pick goes to Colorado. They draft Mikhail Gulyayev. In 2024, Edmonton drafts 32nd. They get Sam O'Reilly. So I think it's worth it for Florida to win the Cup and let the Oilers have that number 32 pick and winning the Stanley Cup and all that. 2025, they win the Stanley Cup. The number 32 pick goes to Calgary, who draft Cullen Porter. So it definitely seems like teams that win the Stanley Cup end up with no first-round draft pick that year. Makes total sense. But for the teams that never win the Stanley Cup and keep trading their first-round picks, we'll get to them. LA, 6 times. They haven't won the Stanley Cup over that time either, so we're here. That was quick. Number 13 in 2015, Boston drafts Jacobs Borrell. Again, we won't discuss who else was available in the 2015 draft at that point. As a Bruins fan, it still pains me to no end. 2016, traded the number 21 draft pick to Carolina. Julien Gauthier taken at that spot. I don't think there's big regrets there either. 2022, they traded the number 19 pick to Minnesota. That's Liam Ogren. Ogren may end up being a good NHLer. May. And so I think the fact that we're saying may end up being a decent third line like that. So I don't think there's a huge regret there. Number 22 traded in 2023. Philadelphia drafts Oliver Bonk. If you have a chance to draft Bonk and you don't, it's a regret. 2024 drafted 21st overall by Montreal, Michael Hague. So Montreal picking up a player there that is expected to be a good NHL player. 2025, the number 24 draft pick traded to Pittsburgh, Will Horkoff, who is, I believe, the son of Sean Horkoff, who used to play for the Oilers and other teams as well. So we'll see if they end up regretting that trade or not. But, I mean, there isn't anybody who really jumps off the page at this point, but keep an eye on the most recent picks, because a couple years from now, the story could definitely change. The Minnesota Wild have traded 4 first-round picks. 2017, they traded the number 23 pick, Pierre-Olivier Joseph, drafted by the Arizona Coyotes. He's, of course, now kind of an extra for the Vancouver Canucks, number 7 defenseman, ideally. So, probably not a huge regret there. 2021, that swap with Edmonton. Edmonton drafts 22nd instead of 20th, and they draft Xavier Bourgault. So, and I do remember Oiler fans at the time defending the trade and defending the move, and we don't really need a goaltender was a comment that I saw a lot. I saw comments from Oiler fans too of, well, we've got Rodrigue in the minors, so we're good. Then 2024, it's a swap of picks again. Number 13, Jet Luchenko, is drafted by Philadelphia that year. We'll come back to that swap when we get to Philadelphia. Philadelphia in a couple of swaps here. 2025, Columbus drafts a goaltender, Pyotr Andrianov. And what was shocking there was Andrianov wasn't considered to be the best goaltender in the draft. Columbus drafts him 20th overall. We'll see if Columbus knows something that the scouts didn't. So, interesting when you look at Minnesota. I don't think there's any regrets because they got Wallstead from Edmonton there. I think they feel pretty good about that. Still, absolutely baffling. Montreal, once. This year. That's it. Kashan Aitchison, drafted by the Islanders with the number 17 pick. Montreal does not apparently trade their draft picks, which has been good because Montreal hasn't really been a contender. They've had some good seasons in there. I do approve of a general manager holding on to first-round draft picks for a team that's probably not going to win the Stanley Cup. I think that's always the right move. For Nashville, they've moved 2 of theirs. 2015, the number 24 pick traded to Philadelphia. Travis Konechny drafted at that spot. I think Nashville would love to have Travis Konechny in their lineup right now. And that's the number 24 pick in the same draft where Boston drafts Senyshyn 15 and they draft Zboril 13. Good job, Don Sweeney. This is why he's still employed. Nicolas Baudouin was drafted 27th overall in 2018 by Chicago. I don't think there's a huge regret there for Nashville, but I think Konechny might be a regret. So only 2 picks traded, but one of them I think with great regret. That was an absolutely stacked draft. For New Jersey, there's only 2 for them as well. 2016 and a swap of picks. Logan Brown was drafted 11th overall by the Ottawa Senators. 2023, it's the number 26 pick, Quentin Musty, drafted by San Jose. He is a highly thought of prospect in the San Jose organization who's playing for the Barracuda currently. So we'll see if that ends up being a pick that they regret trading or not. Might take Musty a little bit longer, but he could get there. The New York Islanders, 6 times. I don't have 6 fingers on one hand. Six times. So back in 2015, they trade the number 21 pick. Ottawa drafts Colin White. One of those misses in the 2015 draft, I guess. 2017, they traded the number 15 pick. Vegas drafts Eric Brandstrom. That was the trade for considerations in the expansion draft. Brandstrom has not had the kind of career that he was expected to, so the Islanders kind of dodge a bullet there in this video. 2021, the number 29 pick traded. New Jersey drafts Chase Stillman. 2022, the number 13 pick ends up going to Chicago. Frank Nazar, drafted by Chicago. He's in a bit of a goal drought right now, but he's still a very good forward, so there you go. 2022, they traded the number 30 pick. Brad Lambert, drafted by Winnipeg there. He's still trying to break through. This year, 2025, the number 12 pick traded to Philadelphia. Jack Nesbitt, drafted at 12 by the Philadelphia Flyers, so we'll see if that's one that they regret. Nope, I'm on the wrong team here. I switched teams. So Frank Nazar, 2023 for the Islanders, number 17, Axel Sandin Pellikka. What's interesting with Sandine Pellikka, I think this is, it's my eyesight. I can just blame the cataracts. But Sandine Pellikka, I think there's some blindness here because that pick went through Vancouver on the way to Detroit. And I wouldn't have minded Sandine Pellikka with the Canucks. Just saying. And at the time, there was a lot of, we don't need a mid-round pick. Do we need one now? 2024, the number 18 pick, Sacha Boisvert, drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks. So, I mean, for the Islanders overall, I think they'd love to have Nazar in their lineup. I think Sandine Pellikka, maybe, right? The New York Islanders, though, they're pretty good on the blue line, and they have this guy named Schaefer, who I think they're pretty happy with. All right, so before I bungled the whole thing up, we can just forget that I did that, right? You're not going to let me forget I did that? All right, Rangers. Drafting 28th overall in 2015, they draft they traded the number 28 pick, Anthony Beauvillier, drafted by the Islanders. So, I don't know how much they regret that one, really. Dennis Cholowski in 2016 was drafted by Detroit 20th overall. That was a Rangers draft pick. I don't know how much they regret that one either. Probably not. Brad Lambert. This is where Lambert shows up. Number 30 pick. Rangers pick. Winnipeg ends up, of course, drafting Lambert. And this is where Nesbitt comes in. 12th pick by Philadelphia in 2025. So, again, it's too early to decide on the 2025 picks for the most part. For the most part, some of them are in the NHL. Ottawa. Ottawa's traded 5. So now we go back to New Jersey. New Jersey, Logan Brown was the number 11 pick that Ottawa got. New Jersey ends up at number 12 taking Michael McLeod. So that's a swap of picks. Neither player's with that organization anymore, so it's kind of a wash there, isn't it? 2019, one that hurts. So if you're a Sens fan, cover your ears. Number 4, Bowen Byram, drafted by Colorado. It didn't end up hurting as much as people thought at the time. There was an expectation that with Byram and Makar that you could just basically run the table with Colorado on the blue line, that they could both play 30 minutes a game. Byram hasn't quite lived up to that potential. He's now in Buffalo. He might be available for trade again soon. But that's still a pick that I think Ottawa would like to have back. Would be that number 4 pick. 2022, the number 7 pick. Chicago took Kevin Korchinski. Korchinski's in Rockford. There's still some debate about how much upside is there. But he's still young, so we'll see. 2023, 12th overall pick, traded to Arizona, Daniel Boot. So if you're a Utah fan, Boot could have been a member of the Ottawa Senators, but they traded that pick to Arizona. You're welcome. 2025, so this year, the number 21 pick, traded. Nashville ends up taking Cameron Reed. So way too early to see whether or not that one's a mistake, but I would say of the 5 on the board, Bowen Byram's one that the Sens would love to have in their lineup, especially as a draft pick that's free of charge, right? But the Erik Karlsson trade ended up helping and hurting both San Jose and Ottawa. It's one of those weird things, and I could definitely do a video looking back on that trade. Philadelphia, surrounding out this column, 4 for Philadelphia, and now we'll talk about the swaps too. 2016, Logan Stanley ends up being taken 18th overall by Winnipeg, so that was a Philadelphia pick. And you know what? Logan Stanley would suit the Philadelphia Flyers. He is your traditional Philadelphia Flyer. He's big, he's physical, he can fight. Then 2019, they traded the number 11 pick. Arizona ends up drafting Victor Soderstrom, and that's a swap. Cam York taken 14th overall by Philadelphia that year. So York for Soderstrom, Philadelphia takes that trade all day long. 2021, the number 14 picks traded to Buffalo. Isaac Rosen, drafted by the Sabres in that spot. 2024, Minnesota, and this is the other swap, ends up drafting 12th overall. They get Zeev Buium. So, of course, Buium's really seen his stock rise since that draft. And in that swap, Jet Luchenko was taken 13th overall by Philadelphia. And, of course, the discussion point then was they could have taken Luchenko later. They didn't need to take him in the first round. The other discussion point I would have is I would take Buium over Luchenko. But that's me. All right. The Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins are on the board 7 times. 7. 2015, the number 16 pick ends up with the New York Islanders. They draft Matthew Barzal. I think they'd like to have Matthew Barzal in Pittsburgh. 2016, the number 30 pick, so Stanley Cup winner Sam Steele ends up going to Anaheim. 2017, the number 31 pick, so Stanley Cup winner, because that's the year that Vegas starts drafting, Klim Kostin, drafted by St. Louis. So both of those years, Pittsburgh trade their first round pick. Both years Florida wins, they trade their first round pick. And we'll get to Tampa, but it's a very similar story going on there as well. 2018, the number 22 pick ends up being traded to the New York Rangers, and Keandre Miller was drafted there. 2020, the number 15 pick ends up in Toronto. Sadly, it's Rodion Amirov. So Amirov, of course, life ends up being cut short. Absolutely tragic story there. 2021, Minnesota ends up drafting Carson Lambos with a draft pick that had been Pittsburgh's. He has not broke through in the NHL as of yet. 2024, Buffalo drafts 14th. They get Consta Helenius with a pick from the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Penguins are wise now to stop moving first-round picks. Even though they're in a playoff spot right now, I still would not be moving a first-round pick. Is Kyle Dubas going to move a first-round pick? Now that I've said it, right? That's what'll end up happening. So now that I've said it. All right, San Jose. 4 times San Jose's on the board. Back in 2016, the 29th overall pick ends up going to Boston. They draft Trent Frederick. So Frederick ends up having a pretty decent career in Boston. Now, of course, he's in Edmonton. 2019, the number 29 pick, Braden Tracy, goes to Anaheim. I don't think San Jose regrets that. 2020, the number 3 pick ends up going to Ottawa. Tim Stützle. So it's pretty good for Ottawa, right? Again, the Erik Karlsson deal hurt and helped both teams. 2022, the number 11 pick ends up with Arizona, and Connor Geekie was drafted by Arizona. He's still trying to break through now in Tampa. So awkward, a little bit, kind of, sort of. The Seattle Kraken, nothing to report here. They have not moved their picks. That being said, their success level with the picks they've had, that might be a topic for discussion at some point. That might be the next discussion point that I have, is looking at first-round picks and who's done well and who's maybe had more of a struggle. If I'm going to go all the way back to 2015, though, I'm going to have to do a video on the Western Conference and the Eastern Conference, because I don't have enough room on this board. I can't write that small. But yeah, Seattle, nothing to report from Seattle. The St. Louis Blues, 4 times they show up on the board. 2015, they trade the number 25 pick. Winnipeg drafts Jack Roslovic. It was kind of a stacked draft, but there were still depth players, and there were some misses. Congratulations, Boston, on that. 2016, the number 28 pick ends up going to Washington. I do believe that's a swap of picks as well. Yeah, it is. It's a swap of picks there as well. So let me... Where's the black marker? Let me just find the black marker. Now, when I say swap, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a trade directly involving those teams with each other, but it's that, okay, you get this pick, and they end up getting each other's picks. So, Lucas Johansson, drafted 28th overall by the Capitals. I was a big vocal supporter of Johansson, never quite worked out for him at the NHL level. 2017, the number 14 pick ends up being taken by Philadelphia, and Joel Farabee ends up being the one that they lose there. And then in 2019, the year they win the Stanley Cup, Ryan Johnson ends up being the pick that goes to Buffalo to complete the trade for Ryan O'Reilly, which is the reason St. Louis won the Stanley Cup. Or at least one of the main reasons St. Louis wins the Stanley Cup is that Ryan O'Reilly trade. I do apologize to Buffalo. We're going to get to the Eichel trade at some point too. So Buffalo's helping other teams win Stanley Cups. That's a form of winning, right? Tampa. Tampa's moved a lot of picks. Sit down and get ready. 7. Gabriel Carlsson traded 2015, the number 29 pick. Columbus drafted Gabriel Carlsson at that 29th spot. 2018, drafting 28th overall, the Rangers draft Nils Lundqvist. 2020, the 31st overall pick, so your Stanley Cup winner, the Tampa Bay Lightning. The number 31 pick ends up going to San Jose. They get Ozzy Weisblatt, who of course is now in Nashville. 2021... number 32 pick, so Stanley Cup winner, Tampa. Both years they won the Stanley Cup. They traded the number 1 pick. Nolan Allen ends up being drafted by Chicago. 2023, the number 19 pick ends up in Chicago, and that's Oliver Moore. They might regret that one a little bit. 2024, the number 20 pick ends up with the New York Islanders. Cole Yzerman drafted in that spot, and so we'll see if they regret that at a later date, right? And then this year, Logan Hensler's drafted 23rd overall by Ottawa with the pick that should have been Tampa's. So they've kept, only by my count, the 2016, 2017, 2019, and 2022 first-round picks. Tampa's a team, too, that I think need to stop trading first-round picks. They need more youth in their organization. I know they do a lot of really good stuff when it comes to their pro scouting, and they get steals out of the AHL and everything, but it's a good idea to stop trading first-round draft picks, I think, for them. Which brings us to Toronto. The Toronto Maple Leafs have moved 8. Toronto has moved more first-round draft picks than everybody else on the board. I'm just bewildered. Because we've got Stanley Cup champions that have moved like 7 here, but Toronto, it's 8. In 2018, the number 25 pick was Dominic Bach, drafted by St. Louis. They don't regret that one so much. 2019, the number 22 pick, LA drafts Tobias Bjornfot. Probably don't regret that one so much. 2020, Carolina drafting 13th, Seth Jarvis. This was the pick they sacrificed to get rid of Patrick Marleau's contract, which Carolina then got rid of. They got rid of that contract. They bought it out. And I think Carolina's pretty happy with Seth Jarvis. I think Seth Jarvis is exactly the type of forward the Toronto Maple Leafs desperately need at this point in time. 2021, they traded the number 25 pick. Corson Kuhlman's drafted by Columbus in that spot. Probably not a huge regret losing that pick. But 2022, that number 25 draft pick Chicago gets, Sam Rinzel. Sam Rinzel, highly thought of on that Chicago blue line, a stacked Chicago blue line when you look at how many good young players there are on it. And Toronto, a team that needs good young defensemen, and there's Sam Rinzel, pick traded to Chicago. 2023, the number 25 pick, St. Louis takes Otto Stenberg. And then Anaheim in 2024, it's Stian Solberg, the number 23 pick, gone to Anaheim. And then this year, the number 25 pick, Vaclav Nestrasil, goes to Chicago. So 8 first-round draft picks gone, and they've got out of the first round of the playoffs twice. And they've got out of the second round 0 times. I've talked about it. I'm talking about it again here. Toronto needs to hold on to first-round picks. Just stop. Because even if we just look at the players taken and we say Jarvis and Rinzel would look great in Toronto, one thing I didn't do here and would definitely be a discussion point in the comments, there are other players available they could have taken that ended up being pretty good NHLers. So just stop trading first-round draft picks. Utah's pretty easy. Utah hasn't traded either of their first-round picks since they moved because they haven't made the playoff. Well, yeah, since they haven't made the playoffs, so you don't do that. Arizona was pretty good at collecting draft picks and collecting draft capital, and so Utah's they're reaping the benefits of that at this point in time. The Vancouver Canucks, three first-round draft picks moved. And 2020, the number 20 pick ends up being Shakir Mahatmadulin, goes to New Jersey. This, of course, is the pick that they traded to Tampa in the very discussed at the time, I think it was the JT Miller trade, how the Canucks were going to regret that forever. I don't think they did. But 2021, I got mad about this one. Number 9 pick to Arizona, Dylan Guenther. Or, as Canuck fans told me at the time, the guy sucks. Who cares? We got rid of the Eriksson contract. We got rid of all these bad contracts. So we gave up a draft pick. Who cares? All those contracts had a year left in them. Dylan Guenther looks like he could be a 40-goal scorer in the NHL. So I still don't think that's worth trading out bad. And remember, they still didn't make the playoffs. That's why it was a number 9 draft pick. So, and then that got them the Ekman-Larsson contract. Anyway, before I get too worked up. Then last year, 2024, the number 28 pick ends up going to Calgary, Matvei Gridin. And I do think that's one that the Canucks could end up regretting at some point in time. The Vegas Golden Knights, they weren't shy early on about moving their picks. 2018, the number 30 draft pick, Joe Veleno to Detroit. At the time, I thought that could be a huge steal for Detroit. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. 2022, the number 16 pick goes to Buffalo. That's Noah Ostlund, who is a good young player. Some upside there. 2025, the number 26 pick ends up with Nashville, Riker Lee. Nashville's on this board a lot as having got extra draft picks in the first round. So kudos to Nashville for that over the years. But yeah, Vegas is not shy about moving the number 1 draft pick. Interestingly enough, the year they won the Stanley Cup, they did not trade their first round draft pick, and neither did Washington. The Washington Capitals did not move their first round draft pick. They are the only 2 teams, I believe, on the board that did not move their first round draft pick the year they won the Stanley Cup from 2015 until 2025. Washington's moved 4. Now, 2016, the swap. Lucas Johansson ends up being taken 28th overall by Washington. In that draft, taken at 26th by St. Louis, Tage Thompson. So Thompson, of course, ends up being traded to Buffalo as part of the O'Reilly deal. But I think Washington would love to have Tage Thompson. Can you imagine Tage Thompson in the Washington Capitals lineup with all those tall guys? And he's pretty darn tall himself. Be insane. Morgan Frost, the number 27 pick, taken by Philadelphia in 2017. So what's interesting is both Farabee and Frost were traded for first-round picks, and now they're both in Calgary. Connor Zary is in Calgary. The number 24 pick in 2020 of the Capitals ends up with Calgary. And so Zary's a Flame that way. Then 2021, the number 23 pick, traded to Dallas. Wyatt Johnston drafted by Dallas. So, Tage Thompson, Wyatt Johnston, you might have yourself a dynasty in Washington if they'd found a way to make that work. Financially, you'd have to find a way to make that work. I'm not going to pretend that the salary cap doesn't exist. You add Tage Thompson and Wyatt Johnston, your salary cap's going to be a problem in Washington, but in a good way, right? Which brings us to the final team on the board, and that's Winnipeg. They've moved 3 first-round draft picks. 2017, number 13 was traded to Vegas, Nick Suzuki. We always talk about how Vegas made a mistake trading Suzuki to Montreal. I still believe that's the case. I think Winnipeg should have let Vegas take whoever in the expansion draft, kept that pick, and taken Nick Suzuki. You look at that Winnipeg team right now, Nick Suzuki is exactly what they need. That is there's always all this talk about their depth down the middle. Nick Suzuki solves that. Absolutely solves that just right away. The number 29 pick in 2018 traded to Toronto, Rasmus Sandin. Decent top 4 defenseman now in Washington. I don't know how much regret there would be in Winnipeg to moving that pick. And 2024, so still early, number 26 pick, Liam Greentree, drafted by the LA Kings. So for Winnipeg, they'd probably want Suzuki in their lineup if they had the choice. But there you go. A look at which teams might regret the moves that got made. And during this video, the garbage truck was really noisy outside, so I had to pause for that. And outside of that, no major distractions other than me mixing up the picks for the Islanders and the Rangers. But there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Hit like and subscribe in the event you may not have done so already. And so the question I have for people watching this is, which pick do you wish your team had kept? And which ones do you look at and go, you know what? It's fine. It makes total sense that they moved all those picks because of Stanley Cup or other advancement the team has had. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.